Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM Today on the program, we'll be joined by Catherine Hicks, president of the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP, to discuss her support of the 76ers Arena project. Ellie Kearns will offer us a preview of Penn Environment's latest report on where Pennsylvania ranks in regards to renewable energy production. Vanessa Maria Graber will share with us information about voting here in the Commonwealth. And our own Lance Haber will discuss new Federal Trade Commission policies that could benefit consumers all over the country, not just here in Philadelphia. So that's good news. Denise, are you with us? I can't hear you, Denise.
Because I didn't turn on the mic.
There we go. How are you, Denise?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. We have a loaded show tonight. And just a reminder for people, next week will be our pre-election show, and the following week will be our post-election show. So that's where we're going to be for the next 2 weeks. But tonight, we have all kinds of stuff planned. So here is our interview with Catherine Hicks, president of the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP.
We will be able to start. Larry is going to start because he's got to go and cover.
Let's fast forward through that really quick.
Yeah, let's do that.
Part of doing a live show. And we'll get right to the interview there. I did have to leave early from that interview, so people know, to go to City Council. Here it is. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into it, can you tell us a little bit about the Philadelphia branch of the NAACP?
Okay, so the Philadelphia branch NAACP, we're the oldest civil rights organization in pretty much the nation. And we are here, our mission really is to achieve equity, political rights, social inclusion by advancing policies, practices that expand human and civil rights, eliminate discrimination, and accelerate the well-being, education, and economic security of the Black people and all persons of color. So we are like the voice of the community. That's what we do.
So how did the NAACP come to support the Arena project?
So we were actually approached by the 76ers organization, along with some of the other groups that ended up endorsing, like Black clergy, a couple of the unions, and they allowed us to view their vision of what they wanted to do with the 76th place. After reviewing it and having a meeting with our executive board, looking over the project itself and how it would enhance Philadelphia, enhance the Black community, we decided that, we would endorse this project.
Are you concerned that the legislation as it's currently written has no mechanism for accountability when it comes to the promises the 76ers have made regarding the commitments that you've touted in your endorsement of the project?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, it's still a working project. So we are going to hold them accountable to what they said would happen. But I mean, they still have time to make sure that all that is done. So that's not a total concern. It's something that we will be looking at. But from what they are putting together in the timeline, we understand that it is still doable.
If those, and we refer to them as clawbacks, meaning if the city doesn't, or if the arena operators don't reach the certain threshold that they said, they would have to give money back to the city, or organizations, however that can be constructed. If that's not in there when the final legislation is passed, would that be an issue for you?
Well, that would be something that, again, that we would be looking at very seriously, and it's something that we're going to be at the table for the entire process. So there will be time for us to go back and forth on certain issues.
Do you share the concerns of those in Chinatown and the neighborhood communities that fear the project is going to adversely affect their neighborhoods?
That was one of the things that we looked at as well. And the arena, again, it's not being built in Chinatown. So therefore, I don't feel that the residents or the businesses will be displaced. What I do think is that this will enhance their area as far as foot traffic, as far as more opportunities for those businesses that are now struggling. I don't know if you've been to Chinatown recently, but there are a lot of closed businesses down there, along with right on the where First District Plaza is. That whole area is blighted to a certain extent. So we feel that this may be an opportunity to change that and give the city a chance to recoup, because, since COVID, we still are not back to 100% of anything.
Of course. The studies we've seen and the experts we've been, and I want to commend you because you're the first person who's pro arena who has spoken with us, despite multiple inquiries to all kinds of people. No one wants to do this.
Wow.
And the reason, I think, is because of what I'm going to ask you next. All the studies that we have seen, all the experts to whom we have spoken over the last year, and the official studies that have been created by academics and people who study business suggest that 2/3 of the businesses in Chinatown will be negatively impacted by this project. And when I look at that, I think, oh, okay, now I understand why people might be against this. And I also look at it and say, if it were me, if I worked there, if I had my business there, I'd be very concerned about this. Particularly, we're not just talking about the completion of the arena, we're talking about the long ramp to get to it.
Yes.
Tearing down what's currently there and then the building, which people are telling us could take 5 or 6 years. Those are the concerns that we keep hearing about. And those are the primary concerns. So when we look at what experts are saying, what we keep hearing over and over again, what people there are telling us, does that make an organization such as yours say, listen, we still support the project, but we need to make sure that the people who live there currently and work there currently aren't getting the raw end of the stick on this?
Absolutely. But again, I feel like when you're looking at this opportunity, are we just looking at Chinatown, or are we looking at the whole city? Because it's more than Chinatown that will be affected by the 76 arena. And right now, how I see it, 76 will create economic opportunities for small businesses, communities of color in Philadelphia and around Center City. Again, they're talking about creating a $1.5 billion in the next tax revenue for the city that will help the school district. We're struggling. Our school district is struggling. We need that money. We need these opportunities. Again, it's still a catalyst for both revitalization, economic development along Market East and the surrounding areas. So I feel like the businesses, and again, these are polls. These are, sort of estimates or whatever of things that can happen. I believe that the 76ers organization is also looking at that, and they're looking at ways along with us and those other stakeholders who are at the table of ensuring that everyone will have the opportunity to advance in some way or have some type of economic opportunity.
This project, from the research we've done, and again, speaking with experts, mirrors what happened in Washington, D.C. There were these same concerns. People said, no, this is going to be okay. And then it didn't turn out well in Washington, D.C. One of the things that happened in that project was, it sort of became divided along racial lines. And that, when you had mentioned that the 76ers came to the NAACP, that's where, it sort of rings a little bit for me. So is that endorsement, the 76ers seeking that endorsement of this project, an effort to divide the community along racial lines, so that it's an attempt to minimize the objections of the Chinese community, people who are against the project? Did that concern you at all?
No, because this is an opportunity that has never been given to the African American community, the Black community. When you go throughout major cities or all around, they all have a Chinatown. Where do you go that you have an area that is predominantly doing well, that is predominantly Black? We have always been sort of left out and not had a seat at the table, not had certain opportunities. You know, I applaud the 76ers that they would include us and give opportunities that we and also other communities of color have not had. You know, when you're talking about the building trades, you know, for many years, they have only gotten a second portion, like a partial portion of any major development. The 76ers are bringing them more to the table because it is a group that has been left out. So they're not only wanting to ensure that Chinatown is included and they are looking at what will benefit them, but they're also looking at the other communities in a whole. That area, 76, well, not 76 Place, but First District Plaza was always an area where the African American community would go to shop, and now it's a ghost town. The mall is an extremely beautiful mall, but it's empty. There's stores in it, but it's not thriving. So this is an opportunity for, you know, we're talking about trying to make opportunity for some of the struggling communities in the city, and the African American community is one of those. So this would be an opportunity to see what we can do, not only for our youth when we're talking about economic development, but, you know, for an entire community to give them a chance to have something that they've never had an opportunity to have before. So I applaud the 76ers for that.
All right. I'd like to bring Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
My question is about, we talked a little bit about holding the Sixers themselves accountable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in how we hold the building trades accountable, because let's be honest here. One of the
Mm-hmm.
problems that we have with any construction that goes on here in Philadelphia is that when you look at the people who are actually getting the construction jobs, most of them are not from here. There's a lot of New Jersey plates, people coming from Bucks, Montgomery, and Delaware County. There's not a lot of people from Philadelphia itself that are getting the jobs. So is the NAACP thinking about how to make sure that the unions are accountable as well?
Absolutely. So, you know, one of our partners and one of the organizations that is very supportive of us is Local 332, Luna, and they are a large building trades union that is predominantly Black. And the 76ers, they realized that in the past, you know, there has been talk of inclusion for the building trades and African American participation. They are working with these organizations, getting them prepared, because a lot of times what the issue was is that they didn't have the manpower, or they didn't have all of the training necessary to do some of these large construction projects. But that is one of the things that the 76ers realize, and that's why they are starting this like 5 years out, preparing these organizations to make sure they're ready. And that's one of the reasons that, again, the African American Chamber has joined on, because they too are going to ensure that, you know, African American inclusion is there, but that they are also trained and ready to be able to step up when it's time for them to do so.
Okay. Now, another project that the Philadelphia NAACP was involved in that had some of the same pushback because of inclusion rates was the live casino on just off of Delaware Avenue near the sports complex. And that's largely been a successful project. They have not only met their inclusion goals, they have exceeded them. what can you take from that project and how the NAACP advocated for that you could apply to 76th Place?
Well, at that time, I was not the president, so that I believe was probably under Minister Rodney Muhammad. I'm not really sure what their MOU was, or what was included in that, but that is something that we can look at as well. The pluses that were done, and we can apply it to what's happening with the 76th Place. But what I will say for this particular project, again, we have a seat at the table. We are going to be engaged. We are going to be seeing the process through. We'll be a part of that. So our guarantee is pretty much that we're going to make sure that what was said, we're holding them accountable, but we're also looking for if there are some things that need to be modified or changed in some type of way, that we're there so that we'll be able to do that.
Now, have you all spoken to Councilman Squilla, Mark Squilla, who's going to be introducing this legislation, about the legislation itself and any concerns you might have?
Well, that's a part of what we will be doing. We haven't had the opportunity to do it yet. We're giving everybody their space to make certain decisions, and then we're coming together. That is the process now, where we're all sort of, coming together, meeting, going over what some of the concerns and issues are. I think the mayor did an excellent job of her presentation as to why this particular project would benefit the city, and we're using some of those points to sort of talk to the community. We're talking about now having more. The NAACP will have more town hall meetings on this. That's just to make sure that everyone they understand why we, as the NAACP, are in supporting this particular project. So we will be talking with Councilman Squilla and a few of the other council people as well.
Okay, now you have been president of the Philadelphia NAACP for how long?
This is the third year.
Okay.
So we're going into an election now.
Okay. So my question is, when you decided to run for this office, did you think that construction projects and whether or not they are inclusive of the community would become so much of what you had to deal with? Or did you think that this was just going to be like, okay, we make sure that people's civil rights are protected, we make sure they're not harassed by the police, the stuff that we make sure that their voting rights are protected, the stuff that the NAACP, that most people know the NAACP to be involved in?
No, I did not know about this, but I hoped for it. I mean, this is, when we talk about economic development, that's civil rights to me. We are the future of our communities is based on what we are able to do as a people. So something like this was very, very important. I was happy to be a part of it. And it is something that, no, I was not expecting, but I welcome, and hopefully more projects like this will come about that we can be a part of and endorse as well, just to again strengthen our city, but make sure that the NAACP is known not only for civil rights, but to also make sure that we're speaking for those who can't speak for themselves.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for being on Hall Monitor.
Thank you.
All right. We'd like to thank Catherine Hicks for joining us on the program tonight. And go ahead, Denise.
I was going to say, I have a little bit of news regarding the proposed legislation for the Sixers Stadium. What I'm hearing right now from my sources in City Hall is that that it hasn't been, set in stone and it's going to be introduced tomorrow. What I'm hearing is that it's going to be, as my husband Chris Murray would put it, a game time decision.
Yes.
As to whether or not the legislation gets introduced. But that said, people on both sides of the argument are preparing to come to city council and basically make it so public comment is 10 years long. And because I love public comment so much, I'm actually like, like, okay, I'll bring in extra coffee and a big bottle of water and maybe as this goes on, muffins, because there will be that
Yeah.
long of public comment.
Well, what I've been told is one of the hangups is the community benefits agreement.
Mhm.
That seems to be one of the major sticking points right now. It may not be resolved. Well, that's exactly what I had heard, Denise.
Mhm.
50-50 that it's introduced tomorrow. If not
Right.
tomorrow, then most likely next week.
But the thing
But
is, the community benefits agreement, if you're not involving the actual community in the community benefits agreement, how that's going to get straightened out is beyond my capacity for understanding. Hopefully, someone with a lot, bigger brain than I am can come up with that.
we reported on that almost a month ago,
Mhm.
I believe. We've since seen it in other places. But we reported on that about a month ago about the issues with that, and we'll see if that gets rectified. Now we'd like to bring in Vanessa Maria Graber. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about some of the things you've been working on. You co-hosted an important seminar last night. Can you tell us a little bit about that and then how that relates?
Yeah, that's correct. So last night, I hosted a webinar as an online training for journalists to make them aware of potential election-related disinformation. And so we went through a number of possibilities that are potential to be circulating online and on social media now until election day and after the election. And so we went through a number of different scenarios, how to spot disinformation, how to use journalism, I like shows like ours, Hall Monitor, to debunk disinformation, and why it's important to verify and fact check all of these rumors and shady things that you're seeing on the internet.
So when it's really important for journalists to understand that, first of all. It's crucial. But what can the average voter do? Because they're getting bombarded by so many things every day, right? And how can the average consumer of news, an average voter, look at something and say, is that real? Is that not real? How does that work?
That's correct. So even though the webinar was for journalists, it was open to the public. So many people who are not journalists also were in attendance, because I think many of us want to know what to do to prepare for disinformation. I know I've seen images online that were AI generated, that friends and family had circulated, that actually turned out not to be real. Of course, we see tweets that then start rumors. I remember the tweet about Beyonce potentially performing at the DNC, which was not real, but this rumor spread like wildfire on the internet. So, we're all subject to it. And I think the first thing is we try to teach people how to properly verify information. And this particular training was about voting and elections information. The second thing, too, is to work together, right? Collaborate. Before you share something, ask a friend, ask a journalist, check in with the people who might be experts on the subject. And so when it comes to voting in elections, there are a number of organizations and state and local offices that you can go to in order to verify information. So for example, if you hear a rumor about voter deadlines being extended and you're not really sure, you could go to the Board of Elections website and find out for yourself.
And, what are some of the things that the media could be doing better here?
Well, I think the first thing is to be aware of what those potential narratives are, and I'll go through those in a second. And I think we have to all work really hard at being a trusted source of information. I think right now there's a lot of distrust of mainstream media because, in the past, there has been a lot of racist coverage. There has been headlines that have been misleading. And we're also in the era of clickbait, right? So I think it's really important for media both content creators and journalists, to build that trust and to build a record of providing truthful, verified information, and to show that the reason why you're doing this work is not necessarily to profit off people, but you believe that journalism is a public good.
Now, Denise, we're all journalists here, and
Mhm.
collectively we've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
When you look at the current state of the media and how they handle election coverage, right? And let's be honest, there are different levels of media, in my opinion. That I don't look as the media as like this one big collective thing. I think there's different aspects of it. But what are some of the shortcomings that you see?
Well, for one thing, you're absolutely right. And this is something that drives me nuts when people say the media, like it's one great big lump of something. And that has never been the case. It has never been the big lump. Media, all media is different in some way. But one of the things that, the last 2 or 3 election cycles has kind of brought out to me is the fact that there are new skills that journalists in particular really need to pick up when it comes to covering politics, especially these days, because we're not prepared to. I mean, a lot of the problem that people have been having with political coverage is the fact that folks are acting as if this is just another normal day at the office in terms of this political campaign, these politicians or whatever. They're acting like it's another normal day at the office. It hasn't been a normal day at the office since Donald Trump came down from that escalator in his apartment building in 2015 and announced that he was running for president. If it was a normal day at the office even before that. And I think where we get confused is that we're at the point where we think that we can just cover this like it's a normal race, and it's not. And because of that, we're not used to fact checking in real time. We're not used to understanding that what you see may not necessarily be what you see. There are things that we're not used to having to do as journalists because that's not what we were taught. We were taught, seek the truth and find it, be objective, all those kinds of things. And not all of them still apply. And even though I'm starting to think that it might be too late in this election cycle for us to figure it out, we need to figure it out before the next one, because otherwise, voting misinformation is going to get even more widespread than it already is. And the thing is, just like technology, it's going to get harder to suss out.
Yeah, so let's get into some of those false narratives. And I would argue that it's disinformation.
Mhm.
Misinformation is information that's inaccurate, that's shared by mistake.
Mhm.
But what we're talking about are lies that are deliberately being circulated to sow distrust in our electoral processes. So the first thing that the public should look out for is information about voting dates, polling locations, and deadlines around voting. So the voting process and logistics. We've seen a number of flyers and tweets that are sharing inaccurate information about local election processes. So again, this is a time when you would want to go to the actual local board of election or county commissioners, whoever the local authority is in your community, to double check that. So if you want to verify your polling location, the deadlines to send in your mail-in ballot, the deadlines to register to vote, the deadlines or the periods for early voting, those are the places that you can check. And we also, in addition to that, we have organizations like the Committee of 70 that do a really good job of providing that accurate information. So be on the lookout for information that's new or that's changed. That's definitely one you want to verify with a primary source. The other thing that we saw in 2020 were false narratives about rampant voter fraud. And the reality is that voter fraud is not a widespread problem in the United States. Yes, there have been individual cases of voter fraud recorded, but to the extent that some of these bad actors are saying that it is a widespread problem, that is simply just not true. And we've seen AI generated photos of ballots being destroyed or mishandled. And we've also seen false testimony given by members of the public, especially in 2020, alleging that there was voter fraud. When many of these investigations took place, and a lot of them happened in the context of lawsuits, they were not found to be verified. So again, if you are seeing those claims being shared on social media and the internet, beware. You might not want to share that information right away unless you can verify it. One thing I want to note, and I know that Larry and Denise might find this comical, is that some of the videos being shared are people testifying at a public comment of their city council meeting or board of supervisors. And we know that anybody can testify in city council public comment. You don't have to tell the truth. You don't have to provide evidence. You can make all kinds of false allegations, and that is your right. If you see a video of somebody giving testimony, that does not mean that what they're saying is legitimate. Just because they might be in a setting that looks official, like city council chambers, that still doesn't mean that what they're saying is true. And so we're seeing a lot of videos that look like people are testifying in Congress, when in fact they're just in their local municipality. And again, when those claims were investigated, they were found to be untrue. So be suspicious of testimonial videos like that. Doesn't necessarily mean that those claims are valid. The other thing that unfortunately we saw in 2020 are claims about voter harassment and harassment of election officials. Before sharing these, you want to make sure, again, that that information is accurate. Some of the false claims about election officials, mishandling ballots or changing votes led to actual harassment, threats of violence, and other intimidation tactics used against these election officials. This is why people like Rudy Giuliani were sued and lost in court because of the behavior that resulted after he spread those lies. These folks, they suffered a lot of trauma. So if you're seeing allegations of voter officials not doing what they're supposed to be doing, again, please be wary about sharing that information, because that can literally lead to threats and violence against them. And you don't want to be a part of that. Of course, if they are doing something wrong, there are ways to report that information, and that should be investigated. One of the other unfortunate false narratives that we're seeing is this lie that people who are not citizens of the United States are voting in elections. And again, this is not true. Yes, there have been cases of that recorded across the country, but the number of cases compared to the hundreds of millions of people that have cast votes in the last decade is statistically insignificant. It is literally less than 1/100th of 1%. So we're talking about very, very rare instances. And the majority of those instances were people casting votes by mistake. They weren't doing it intentionally. They thought maybe because they had a green card or resident status, they were allowed to cast ballots. We see this lie continue to be perpetuated by JD Vance and Donald Trump. And again, there's no legitimacy to that whatsoever. And in fact, it really dehumanizes non-citizens. It makes them seem like criminals. It adds to that criminal narrative. You don't want to do that. Again, if you see that narrative, just know that it's not true. Lastly, there has been some changes to voting laws and election laws. And so you want to, verify those things as well. and you want to make sure that you're providing the most up-to-date information. Now, several states have changed the days in which you can begin counting mail-in ballots. So to clarify, for the record, there were attempts in Pennsylvania to change the law at the state level to allow counting of mail-in ballots at an earlier time. Unfortunately, that law did not pass, and now we can only count ballots on election day beginning at 7 a.m. This means that we might not have the results for the state of Pennsylvania on election night, which means we might not know who the president is on election night, like the winner of the presidential election, that is. It might take a couple days. There are 7 states in the United States that don't allow early counting of mail-in ballots. And so again, that all plays a role on whether or not we'll have results. The delay in counting of the votes is not indicative of voter fraud or any bad practices when it comes to counting of ballots. This is a narrative that we see. Again, that's a false narrative. So if you see people saying that, you want to make sure you clarify. There's a lot more people doing mail-in ballots because it's become more accessible. There's still concerns about COVID. And Philadelphia, they eliminated more than 100 polling locations since 2020. And so it makes it harder for people to actually access a polling location, especially if they don't have transportation or childcare. So mail-in ballots become a better option for them. So if you're seeing more mail-in ballots, those are some of the reasons why. And let's see, we have a long list. Okay, last thing, there is a whole website on the state's page that shares information about our voter machines. So if you want to know how they work, how they're tested, how they get certified, you can go online. If you literally search Pennsylvania voting machines, you'll find a website on the state site. It'll give you a list of counties. You can click on Philadelphia County and it will show you the kind of machines that we use. There's instructional videos on how to use the voting machines. We see a lot of lies about the machines malfunctioning, not being certified, and changing people's votes. These are, again, this is disinformation. It's not true. In fact, Fox News settled a lawsuit against them for defamation against the Dominion Voting Machines Company for perpetuating a lie that these voting machines were malfunctioning or defective. And of course, there was no evidence of that. So that's why they had to settle this lawsuit, which resulted in them paying hundreds of millions of dollars. So don't be fooled by lies about defective voting machines. Do your research. And again, let these investigations play out. A lot of them will play out in court if lawsuits are filed, and it will show you definitively if there is evidence or not to these false claims. In the meantime, don't share the information online. Certainly feel free to discuss it with people. Ask the folks here at Hall Monitor. We're here to help you. If you see something you're unsure about, we're here to help you. Check with the County Board of Elections, check out the Committee of 70, and make sure you have the most up-to-date information about elections.
And if I can just hop in really quick, some municipalities, I think Philadelphia allows you to do this, will let you watch them test the machines to see if they're working. And if you're really looking to make sure that these machines are working and they're doing what they're supposed to do, being able to watch as they're being tested live is probably the best way you can do that if you're really that concerned.
Yeah, there's a really great story posted on WHYY about how the voting machines work. You should check that out. If you live in Montgomery County, they've posted a video to their YouTube. It's called The Life of a Ballot. It shows you how a ballot is processed and counted. There's so many resources online. Just make sure you're getting them from legitimate sources.
All right, Vanessa, thank you so much for that. And now we'll have our interview with Ellie Kearns of Penn Environment. All right, Ellie Kearns, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So before we get into the report and what we're going to hear about tomorrow, can you tell us a little bit about Penn Environment?
Yeah, we are a statewide environmental advocacy nonprofit, and Penn Environment works to ensure that all Pennsylvanians have clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and a livable climate to call home.
And for those who may hear the term but aren't exactly sure, what is renewable energy?
Yeah, renewable energy is energy that comes from a source that won't run out. Some of the best examples of renewable energy are wind and solar, because the sun will always shine, the wind will always blow, and when we're able to get energy from those sources, we know it will be consistent and long running without worrying about depleting resources that aren't renewable, like oil and gas.
Mhm. Now, previously, Pennsylvania has ranked dead last, so all the states, in renewable energy
Yes.
production. Why is that? Why are we last?
We've had a long legacy of production, and we just haven't put as much energy or effort into transitioning as a lot of other states have. Even though we're like the fifth largest state by population, there are a lot of big states like Texas that are known for their fossil fuel that have also invested in renewable energy. So they're outpacing us. There are small states like all of our neighbors, even Ohio, they've all just put a little bit more time and energy into investing in renewable energy to continue them on that path. And we just need to do the same.
It's strange to hear Texas is outpacing us on that,
Yes.
because Texas, I would think, just based on the politics and what goes on there, that doesn't sound right, but it is.
Yeah. Well, the sun in Texas and the wind in Texas makes solar and wind energy so cheap and such a smart investment. It's just it's like a why wouldn't you invest it in it type thing. And obviously they're still producing fossil fuels, but they're also putting in a lot of money into investing solar or into growing solar fields and wind farms to help power their state with that energy as well.
Now, Pennsylvania has a long history of coal extraction. My people were Irish coal miners from the Hazleton area, and I'm proud of that. While I support renewable energy, I am proud of the past of it. Pennsylvania still produces a lot of coal, and it might be surprising to hear that. I'm always surprised when I hear it, because I think, well, we're still doing this. Is it? There is concern among some people that phasing out fossil fuels will lead to a decrease in jobs. Is that true, or is there a way to substitute this renewable energy development and create more jobs?
Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for that. We don't focus as much on looking at the jobs numbers. There's a lot of groups that particularly focus on that. But renewable energy, like you still need people to make sure that all runs. And as we just continue to grow that sector, the expectation is that the number of people needed to run all of that will also continue to grow.
Mhm. So when we talk about each state in the country and their renewable production score, how are those rankings developed? What are we looking at here?
The data that we use for this report is based on energy data from the Department of Energy. So it's all federal data, and then we pull all of that information and can rank based on how much the energy grew in each state over the last 10 years, the amount that they rank by the amount that they generated in this past year, and the percent growth. So we can look at a bunch of different analytics to see, oh, maybe they are producing a lot, but it's kind of been stable for the last 10 years. So, or, oh, maybe they're not producing that much, but they've like skyrocketed their growth. So kind of looking at the trends on how renewable energy is developing in all of the different states across the country.
So tomorrow is the press conference. Is there anything you can tell us ahead of time? Like, give us a little sneak peek of what's going to happen.
Yeah, as you mentioned, last year we were pretty much dead last. And while the story is maybe a little bit better, the data still shows that Pennsylvania is missing out on the renewable energy growth that's happening nationwide. But it definitely doesn't have to be that way. Pennsylvania has immense renewable energy potential, and there are some areas where Pennsylvania has been making progress, like electric vehicle registration and electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. But in order to keep up with our neighboring states and maintain our legacy as an energy state, we need to invest more into renewable energy, particularly solar and wind.
And how do we make progress on that? What needs to happen for those things to occur?
Mhm. Yeah, thankfully, we have a lot of opportunities at hand, actually. At the state level, legislators can start making sure we tap into renewable energy by passing Governor Shapiro's Clean Energy Plan. The plan would require utility companies supplying electricity in PA to get 35% of their power from renewable energy sources like wind and solar by 2035, and would also require Pennsylvania's largest global warming polluters to pay for their harmful emissions and then invest those funds into clean energy projects and energy rebates for Pennsylvania consumers. And then as individuals, Pennsylvanians can also tap into the tax credits and rebates available from the Inflation Reduction Act to invest in solar for their home or business, electrify their homes, or purchase both new and used electric vehicles.
All right, I'd like to bring in Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry my camera's not working right now. I guess my question for you is, you make a lot of sense when you talk about how we can maintain our statuses in energy, more energy efficient when it comes to using alternative sources. And yet there's still like little bits of resistance to that. What is it that you think that people don't quite understand about how easy it actually is to do these things, to put solar panels on your house, and that there are tax credits and things available for that?
I think the main thing is that it hasn't always been that way. These tax credits just went into effect a few years ago, and the technology for particularly rooftop solar has just been improving so much over the last few years that it's an entirely different story about putting solar on your home or electrifying than it was even just 5 years ago. So it's a little bit of just like getting informed again about how easy it is. And the technology is improving very rapidly. So it's just getting aware of like the opportunities are just getting better and better all the time.
Now, Philadelphia, as you probably know, has the distinction of being the poorest city of its size in the United States. I used to live in an apartment, this is just my own personal story, that was nothing but electric. Everything was electric. The oven was electric, the heat was electric, everything was electric. And we would get these electric bills that were so bad at one point that I had to, basically take out a loan to pay the electric bill because it had gotten that high, because we were dealing with our own personal poverty at that time. Has the cost of producing energy, like, producing things to where you could have an entirely electric apartment or an electric house, has it gone down enough where people can do it and not have to worry about, do I got to mortgage my house?
That's a really good question. It's a little bit complicated. From purely the generating the electricity standpoint, solar is much cheaper than any fossil fuels per a kilowatt right now. And I can help find the exact numbers as well in the back end. Unfortunately, there are some added politics that go in with when the utilities get involved. Right now, our utility companies in Pennsylvania get very little of their electricity from renewable sources. So the expectation would be that if they invested in these cheaper sources like solar, especially at the utility scale, that would allow them to reduce their energy prices. But unfortunately, that's not always the case when we see the utility companies. but that would be the hope. Rooftop solar, which you can control, and there's things like net metering and like lots of funky details, is generally pays itself back very quickly. A lot of folks have experienced a return on investment within 5 years. And there's a lot of money from both the national and the state level to help people invest in things like that if they want. The Inflation Reduction Act includes a 30% tax credit or direct rebate, depending on who's submitting for any solar installation. And then there is also money from the state available as well.
Now, you mentioned the governor's energy plan, and how passing that plan could help with some of this. Where does that stand right now? Or are you monitoring the legislation? And where does it stand in the process of possibly being passed?
Yeah, so since there's only 4 voting days left in this year's session, the expectation is that unfortunately nothing would pass this year. But I know the entire environmental community is, I shouldn't say entire, but a good chunk of the environmental community has come together to work on these 2 pieces of legislation that are called like PRESS and PACER, so a little bit wonky, but encapsulated in that clean energy plan. So folks are very excited and raring to go to introduce them starting next session, and hopefully get them moving as quickly as we can.
Okay, well, it's hard to get anything passed during an election year. It just, so I can understand that. But thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us. And you are listening to Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5. I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Ellie, where can people learn more about Penn Environment?
Yeah, you can check out our website. We're pennenvironment.org. That's where you can also see all of the results from our research when our report goes live tomorrow.
We'd like to thank Ellie Kearns for being with us and Penn Environment for being with us on the program tonight. Now I'd like to bring on consumer reporter Lance Haver.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Denise, and thank you for the great interview about the arena. Although I didn't agree with much of what was said, I was thankful that someone from the arena community stood up and said this is what they like. I'm always surprised, though, when people of color try and speak for another group. If someone tried to speak for them, they'd raise hell. But somehow people feel comfortable talking for the Chinese community. Kind of strange, if you ask me. But my point tonight is often I complain about the government, and I often complain about what's going on. So I wanted to take a few minutes to say thank you to the Federal Trade Commission for instituting this great new policy, which is called Click to Cancel. And I'm trying to call up the slideshow real quickly, and there we go. So this is the FTC's new policy. This is for the first time since 1973, over 50 years ago. The rules have changed, making it easier for consumers to cancel contracts. The Federal Trade Commission is saying you have to tell consumers what they're buying. You have to make it easy for them to cancel the contract. If they signed up for something that they said was free, free trial period, you have to make it easier for them to cancel it. And if they signed up for a one-time purchase, you have to make it easy for them to limit it to a one-time purchase and not have automatic renewals. So the rule would have been stronger, but the lobbyists for the business communities and the Republicans said, no, they don't want it to be stronger. And there's 2 significant rules that were taken out. The first would have required the marketers to warn you when you're having a renewal. So a lot of us sign up for plans and they automatically renew every year. And most of us forget about it. We don't know about it. The rule would have said before they can automatically renew you, they have to let you know, give you a 30-day notice. The second thing is they would have been able to stop the store or the business from giving you something that you didn't want to know. Now, those 2 things were taken out. But again, even though that is something that would have been better, I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that this is a tremendous benefit for consumers and a real significant change, again, for the first time in over 50 years. I do want to just talk a little bit about what the complaints are, because I think most of us have had them. You go online, there's a product, says free trial. You say, oh, maybe I'll click on it. And then turns out it wasn't what you hoped, or it wasn't what you needed, or found it better someplace else. And you try and cancel, and you can't. There isn't an easy way to cancel the contract. The group Truth in Advertising says it's the #1 complaint they've received. The companies know this, just like they give away coupons with the expectation that people won't use the coupons. They know we forget to cancel subscriptions. They know we forget about automatic renewals. They know we don't check when we say we canceled it. We don't check to see if it actually was canceled. So these are all things that are known. The business, someone who gets an MBA can study the behavior of consumers and discover all of these things. It's so prevalent, it's such a big problem that there's an industry that goes ahead and says, here are services that you can buy that will help you stop buying from other services. It's not one, it's not two, it's a whole list. Now, I'm not going to say anyone's better than the other, and I'm not going to talk about which service you should pay for to help you stop paying for other services. My point is only, if it wasn't such a big problem, there wouldn't be 7 businesses trying to make money off of helping you cancel your contracts. Now, the point I want to make, again, is even though this wasn't great, it is a tremendous step forward, making it easier for people to cancel, to stop businesses from stealing. There are 5 people on the Federal Trade Commission. Federal Trade Commission is appointed by the president and confirmed by the United States Senate. By rule, no one party can have more than 3 appointments. So currently, with a Democratic president, there are 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Maybe not a surprise to people, the vote to make it easier for consumers to cancel contracts, to get refunds, to save money was 3-2. The 2 Republicans voting against it, the 3 Democrats voting for it. And that's one of the things that's going to be on the ballot in the November election, is how do we want the Federal Trade Commission and all the regulatory bodies to function going forward. And I think it's illustrious to point out what the dissenting opinion said. So one of the complaints she had, and this is Commissioner Holyoke, one of the complaints she had was the promise to help consumers save money was made as an election promise when Biden was running for president and Harris was running for vice president. She says it's not fair to pass something that helps them fulfill a campaign obligation and a campaign promise. And again, this is a direct quote. Less than a month from the election day, the commission is hurrying to finish a rule that follows through on a campaign pledge. So the Republican commissioner is saying, hey, candidates shouldn't be held responsible for what they promise while they're campaigning. In fact, it's a bad thing if they go ahead and try and implement their campaign promises. Second thing she says is not enough people were hurt, that it doesn't say enough about what the problem is. It's not enough just to show people are getting cheated. You have to prove more people are getting cheated than what it is. And the last thing that she says is it happened too fast. They've been working on this for 3 years. For 3 years, they've been taking complaints. Literally tens of thousands of consumers have complained. The Attorney General in Washington did a study, found 3.5 million Washingtonians had been in some way cheated. And the commissioner says that's not enough. So again, this is very good news. It's going into effect in 180 days unless the Republican courts throw it out. And it is one of the things I hope people consider when they go to the polling place, that the control of the Federal Trade Commission and other commissions like the federal regulatory commissions will be decided based on who the president is. So thank you, and I appreciate it. And again, finally, I get to report good news.
Lance, thank you so much for that. We'll be back next week on Hall Monitor, where we're going to have our pre-election show, Denise. It's going to be a big night. It's going to be interesting. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.